Hey everybody, it's Rob Koplowitz here. I'm one of your co-hosts today for Lowdown on Low Code. I'm here with John Rymer. Say hi, John.
Hi, John.
Very well. Very nicely done. Hey, folks, thanks for joining again today. This is a good one because we're going to really hit on a couple of topics that I think have been a little bit underserved in Lowdown on Low Code, particularly around areas like process optimization. And of course, we're going to dive into that with an AI lens around process optimization. So we've got a terrific guest and an old friend here who's going to join us. If you like Lowdown on Low Code, please hit the like button, hit the share button. Get the word out to like-minded folks. But let's jump right in. Today we have an old friend from, let's see, goes back to the DST. And then SS&C, and then Business Optics. We've known our guest for a very long time. So welcome today, Kari Moeller.
Well, hi, guys. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, as you said, our tenure together has been really long. Obviously, I started when I was 10, so
yes,
haven't aged a bit.
So let's start with that, Kari, because we like to actually start by getting everybody's backstories. The backstories of how people made their way into this industry and into processes is always fascinating. I frankly think it's the most interesting part of the show. How'd you get here?
You know, it's really interesting. I would say that the intersection of process and technology found me versus me finding it. I think it was my second or third job out of college. And I went to the interview and met with a gentleman who talked about a BPM solution. And, as we were going there, I'm naturally a curious person. So I'm asking a lot of questions, trying to understand the technology. And it was really complex and interesting, yet simple at the same time in terms of what value it could provide. And so I came on at DST and I had a variety of roles, but I think the most beautiful part of working for that company was the runway it gave me to really explore different aspects of it. So, I was able to understand the technical aspect, the selling aspect, interacting with analysts like yourselves. I mean, it quickly just became this passion of connecting strategy to clients through technology and services and how to tell the story around that makes sense to them because they don't wake up living and breathing it. So that's really kind of how I got into process. And then, after DST, as you said, Business Optics, process intelligence and modeling platform, even simpler of a concept that is so far overlooked in terms of why it is important in order to achieve the goals that these organizations are looking to. So that's kind of in a nutshell how I got here.
And I think there's a good argument to be made for the importance of things like modeling and documentation and understanding how processes are optimized is actually at a very interesting inflection point, and it has become far more important than it ever has before. So we're going to spend a lot of time on that. So John, over to you.
Well, let's do it right now, Rob. So we've got a lot of change going on, Kari. As you know, AI coming into the mix, adding new automation opportunities, new risks, et cetera, et cetera. Why is documentation and modeling really important in this, in terms of managing these changes?
Yeah, absolutely. What's interesting is AI. We almost have to pause and take a deep breath because what I find very fascinating about it is how widespread and understood, and I'm going to say understood in a general term, every person is with it because they're taking it into the personal aspects of their life. And so it's not very often that you find a technology that's coming into your career that started in your personal life. So to kind of start with your question, it's modeling and documentation should have always been the starting point, but it was just really easy for companies to kind of just say, no, we're just going to go buy this technology and we're going to build the process in it and not really do kind of some of the core work and understanding their business and documenting the changes, and then the next third, fourth, fifth generation being able to do the same. But it is not, I would say it's not only critical now, it is, to me, it is required. So when I talk to my clients through my consulting practice about this, I said, this is now a time where you can no longer say that's a nice to have. It is a critical must have, because you really don't have one source of the truth of what's happening in your organization.
Mm,
Okay.
mm,
And the thing about process, while it sounds very simple and kind of boring sometimes, is process is really the conglomeration of where your people, your technology, and your data are all interacting to serve your clients.
mm.
If you sit in front of a C-level person and say, do you have one place that you go and you can say, how are my operations, how are they handling, a withdrawal from a retirement account? Can you tell me what that process is? Certainly they can't, nor should they know that by their heart, but they really don't have a way to go into and just see, well, here's our processes and here's how they work. And so with something like AI coming into the mix, you know, we can kind of touch on it maybe a little bit later, but what's interesting about AI is it is absolutely powerful, but if you hang out with your risk and compliance department at all, it's a pretty scary thing to understand. How are you going to audit this? How are you going to make sure that it's doing the right things?
Mm,
And so I think with the modeling and documentation at this point, when you're starting to take these processes, whether you're going full bore into, hey, we're going to go AI and we're going to just throw it in and see where it works, you got to be able to understand what you're doing with it, where you're doing it, what it's connecting to.
right,
AI is only as smart as you make it. And
right,
then the important piece of that is you have data that's going to drive that, but you have human intelligence.
right,
And that's also where, people have to understand that AI can't take you over, just
right,
out of the box, because
right.
it's only as smart as you make it.
One of the phrases we've heard is that AI is an accelerator, but it also will magnify and amplify your processes, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And
Hmm.
so you could, in fact, as many of the early experiments have shown, be victimized by a poor process or a process that actually opens the door for data leakage and so forth. Is that what you're really referring to?
100%. And I think what we've done, I'll just use the past decade as an example with technology, because we've had some really cool technology things, just not quite as innovative as where we're at now.
Mm,
Is we just threw technology on bad processes, and then we wondered why we spent multi millions of dollars and we didn't get this wonderful ROI. And it's largely because we didn't take the time to really understand
right.
what our processes, but are they the right ones? Are
Mm,
they actually good? And so, to your point, yes, you can stick an AI agent over a process and people that have done this job the same way for 30 years, but that doesn't make it good. That
right.
doesn't make it in compliance. That doesn't make it more intelligent than what you're doing. Might make it quicker, doesn't necessarily make it more intelligent.
Right. Awesome. Thanks, Kari. Rob, over to you.
So the quicker part, I'm almost wanting to jump on that because the idea of efficiency versus effectiveness is such
Mhm.
an important piece here. But Kari, you mentioned like you came into this thing, they told you about this thing BPM. BPM was always technology and human states interacting, right? So we've always had this concept of human intelligence, humans making decisions. Now we have these AI capabilities, AI agents that are starting to mimic some of that human decision making, but that brings problems, right? It's opaque.
Mhm.
Like you can't ask the machine the way you can ask a human why you've made a decision, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have important parts in a process where necessarily transparency or a deterministic outcome are required. And sort of that kind of works in my mind into kind of this modeling world and right reimagining these
Mhm.
processes and thinking of where and how these technologies can fit within processes and where and how they should not be implemented in certain instances within a process. um, have you thought about that in the context of process? I know, by the way, that I was supposed to start by saying, Kari, have you dived into AI and agents? But
A little bit.
I know you have, because you send me texts and said, have you seen this? Have you heard this? I spent 12 hours diving into this. So how do we bring these worlds together, and what's kind of the role of process optimization and eventually what we think of as process reimagining, these processes running in very fundamentally different ways?
Yeah, and you said something that like absolutely sparked me, because it's kind of a concept I'm really trying to get clients to understand, which is how do you reimagine your processes? We are at a tipping. You now have the right to say, time out. Let's create the next normal in a way that we never have before. We're not just trying to do incremental efficiency gains, things like that we just have to, move the needle, 1 or 2% in terms of the top line.
Mhm.
Uh, and why this is so important is, I'll give you an example. So I was helping a company who hired me because they wanted to use AI in their marketing area. They wanted to automate a lot of, the emails, the outreach, make it, more personalized to the person who was coming in saying, this is what I need. What can you do for me? It was actually a design business, like construction. And when we started, I said, okay, forget the technology. They were AI, we want AI. At the end of the day, when I took them through their processes, and then I said, here's what we want the process to look like, guys, 80% of it could be done with the technology they already had. They just weren't utilizing different rules and features within the technology. So if you start with the outcome in mind and what you're trying to do and build the process to that, you now have these wonderful puzzle pieces, some of which you've already invested in, that you can decide what goes where. It doesn't all have to be AI. That's the I'll say kind of the scary part of AI is everybody is like on board with it and wants to throw agents and AI into the mix. And it's like, you have invested in some very intelligent platforms. You just don't really know that platform can do these things.
Right.
So that to me is, if you're thinking of process modeling and you're thinking of the outcome, that's how you get to reimagining truly what your business, how it acts and what it does. You no longer are susceptible to just what you think the tech can do.
So
And Rob,
that's the perfect quote. So 10 minutes and 45 seconds, you started a quote that's going to be our promo for this, because it was just perfection. So, so thank you for that. So we're going to take a quick break here, and I want to start the break by saying, Kari, you're doing consulting. You're available for folks.
Mhm.
How should they find you?
So I think the quickest way is honestly just to go on LinkedIn, and just connect with me and just tell me what you're trying to do. And, if there's something that I can support your business with, certainly I will. But if not, working with gentlemen like yourselves and all the other people in my network, there are a lot of really intelligent people out there who can help you solve some of the things you're looking for. And I think what's great about that is we're now more open, I think, as a business culture in terms of idea exchange.
Mm.
And so, yeah, I would say just reach out to me on LinkedIn and let's start from there.
So reach out to Kari on LinkedIn, folks. And then one more question for you, Kari. A lot of our listeners tend to be from the vendor side, the technology providers. May I assume that that's an area, since that's your past, that's an area that you'd be interested in working with those folks as well?
Oh, 100%. Yeah,
100%.
I
Okay.
love it. It's that product marketing function, I think, is so critical. And I think especially some of these newer companies who, everybody has AI, but the companies who are really trying to do different things with it, being able to connect those outcomes is going to be so crucial, because it's exciting, but it's confusing the market at the same time, which I'm sure you guys have run across.
We have absolutely run across it. And, for those of you out there, connect with Kari Moeller. I think that the concept of attaching these things to processes in a meaningful way and reimagining your processes is sort of the next big step that we're looking at. And John and I, going back, working with Kari since she was 10 years old, can highly recommend that this is a person that can help you get there. If you want to work with a couple of old fogies like John and I, or Dave Marcus, Francis Carden, Rick Greenwald, Andrew Bartels, the rest of the analysis.tech gang, you can find us at analysis.tech. So that's our commercial break. Let's go back to you, John.
Okay. So I'd like to pick up where we left off, Kari, in terms of reimagining business processes. We certainly advocate that. If you're just going to sort of sand the edges or do some really trivial things with AI, you're kind of missing the opportunity. How do you? So in working with folks, it's hard to get them to reimagine because it seems big, it seems risky, it seems kind of hairy and expensive. How do you work with them to get them to think about the really making that commitment? And I'm really curious when it comes to AI, how do you talk to them about AI enhancing their people rather than just replacing tasks or maybe even whole employees?
Yeah. So the way I typically have that conversation is I say, you should think of AI right now as a digital assistant. Much like you're probably using it in your personal life when you're writing an email or a text or, whatever it is. It's not taking over you. It is not going to be able to say, you're not going to be able to say, here, you just go talk to other humans for me and hopefully it'll all work out. So
Mm-hmm.
really AI, it's about having them as digital assistants, not digital coworkers. I do think we will get there in some aspects, but we are far off from that in my view because there is so much training. Good data, what is good data, right? Because companies have a lot of it. A, do they have the right access to it? B, is it good? The
Right.
simple example is I'm sure all three of us are 10 different customers in Salesforce across the company. So you can't just rely on AI to be, that. And I mean, Rob knows I can't help but go to a sports analogy. And the way I really describe it to people that somehow has connected is, you know, we're in baseball season. A batter's trying to hit a home run. AI is the most state of the art bat or technology. Yes, baby Royals. I love it. Although I don't love exactly where we're at right now, but Um, but my conversation with them is, listen, if it was just about buying the best equipment, buying the best bat, then everybody could hit a home run, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you've got the hitter, right? The process is really the swing. You've got to be able to connect. Okay, so you've got to be able to take your human, your technology, make those connect in order to really deliver the outcome. And I think we've gone on a pendulum on both sides. In some cases, we've gone way too process heavy and, documented the heck out of things. And, I'm certainly not saying anything bad against Six Sigma or anything like that. And, they put the lean in front of it for a reason to show value quicker, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we swung over to the technology was the outcome. So how do you drive the outcome? Because you've bought this technology who says this is your outcome, so you're going to use me this way.
Mm.
Now we're at the point where it's like the outcome gets to live and breathe. If you look at how do we build the process to the outcome, and then how do we align the people and the technology, so the hitter and the bat to connect to deliver that.
Yep, that's
And
awesome. I love the fact that you've used this. You've talked about outcomes several times, and this is another thing that we've been seeing. That obviously, I guess you're seeing as well, is that if you start with the outcome, and it seems like many customers are now, you're going to have a much better chance of aligning business strategy, resources, people, skills, partners, etc., to achieve that outcome than if you just try to automate, pave the cow path.
yeah, and that's what we got into as even I'll give us vendors a hard time too. We were out there selling our technology, and our technology could solve the world's problems as long as you fit in what our technology could do. Um, that's changed, but I will say the power of something like process modeling is also kind of the concept of lean startup. And I think you guys had a guest on. I've watched multiple of your podcasts, and Rob, you can help remind me of her name. I think she was with NASDAQ or somebody out of New
Oh,
York.
Angela Stewart. Yeah. Amazing.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, we
Great.
refer to her constantly.
Yes, I thought she was brilliant because she wasn't trying to overlay the entire business right out of the gate with AI. No, she took a certain outcome she was trying to achieve and went off to the side and did it.
Yeah.
And I think that's brilliant. And I think that's what companies need to do. And that's where something like process modeling can say, okay, here's how our process is working today. Here's how our test case, if you will, how we built it differently. And here's the different outcomes we got. And then now you can democratize that across your business, right? That's the beauty of AI is it really democratizes data and it puts this concept of the business user versus technical. We're now finally going to empower the business user to make really intelligent changes with data on the fly, which is why I love that you guys, you love low code, right? And
Yes.
it's the speed of a decision to help solve a problem for a person who wants to pay you to do it. That's where we're at.
One other piece I want you to drill in on, Kari. You mentioned bad data, and we've got a colleague named Rick Greenwald who's focused on this aspect of low code and the marriage of low code and AI. And it just seems like there's a lot of disorganized data out there, and there are some ideas about like we have to have a single source of truth. What is that even?
Yeah.
And I wonder if you end up in your work with clients sort of getting into engaging with their data architects and trying to basically get them on the right path, and kind of what advice are you giving them?
Yeah, and I won't say that I have the expertise per se. I do have, people that I've worked with that, are data scientists and are brilliant in this area who can forget things farther than I can remember. But I do think that a lot of the challenge is that they've tried for so many years to get to this data, and they've had a really hard time creating these data lakes and, how does all this come in? What is good? What is bad? And I would say it really does go back to the concept. I'm really kind of seeing this play out now, which is let's take a test case. Let's take the data that we think we need. Now, where does that data sit? And kind of understanding that in a smaller scale to understand like how much you can really scale it up. Because at the end of the day, you have a lot of data, but it doesn't make it the right data. How do you take the data that you have that is good and understand that you might still be missing data, but that's part of the new process, right? Is collecting that good data as part of that. You're not going to have it all perfect right out of the box.
Right.
And pretend like you have to use all the data you have there because sadly you don't, because it's generations of different technologies and different rules and inputting it. And it's kind of like, just went back to a simple thing. I'm Kari E. Moeller, Kari Moeller, K. Moeller. I'm 3 different people already in one organization.
Right. We had a old friend, longtime friend. I'm not calling him old. James Taylor, who came on and talked about decisioning, and he talks about starting with the outcome, which is a decision, and step 1 is what data do we need to make that decision. I think you just reiterated that. That's brilliant. Thank you.
And I'll say that's where these people probably think of process modeling tools as very simplistic things. And, I had the pleasure of having Business Optics as the platform I was working with. The metadata piece is critical. Understanding where that data is in these processes. So it helps you understand where you can get the data, where you are getting the data, and then how you're going to get the data you need to really drive this to the level of intelligence you're hoping. And that's frankly how you're going to get from AI being a digital assistant to a digital coworker. And that's why I say we are not at the digital coworker stage.
Right. Thank you, Rob. Back over to you.
So, Kari, one of my favorite quotes, just to kind of finish this off. One of my favorite quotes from you, and there have been many, but one of my favorites was you were working with an insurance company in a consulting capacity, and they said, "Oh, you know, in order to be dead in our system, you have to die in 7 different systems." Right? It's just so. So let's start to think about, you know, situations like that, which you know are all over the place, and we're starting to think about outcomes. You know, Kari, we've spent a lot of time around kind of the process and modeling and business reengineering, reimagining part of the conversation, but you also have a really, really strong technology background with AWD and now Chorus. So you're sitting with some senior folks in an organization, you're thinking about outcomes. How should they be thinking about their technology landscape to really embrace and exploit this moment?
So, you know, I think the interesting piece there is how much do you understand your technology landscape and who is responsible for understanding that?
Hmm.
And I think you know, what AI is really doing is having every organization rethink roles. So traditionally, right, IT owned the systems, right? Keep the lights on, but you want to touch a system, you got to go through them. They're the gatekeeper. You know, risk kind of plays some rules in there, but ultimately it was IT. Um, and so few in the organization actually understand the power of the technology and what it can do, even
Hmm.
from even basic points of feature function, right? Because the business said, hey, this is what I need. They went through an RFP and they bought it for that. That doesn't mean they understand the power of the platform that they got. There's people that do, but are they really communicating that throughout the business? So, as senior leadership, the challenge that I would say to them is if you let's start with the concept of dying 7 times. And let's not pretend like we don't live in a capitalist society. So, you know, if unfortunately I pass and my daughters get my money, right? And there's a life insurance policy, you want my daughters as your new client. But if all they have, you know, in dealing with, forget about the emotion and the grief, is the frustration of, I don't get why this is so hard. I've talked to you 8 times. You know, how come I can't just say, here's the death certificate, mom is gone. How do I get my assets?
Hmm.
And so I think that, you know, I'm not trying to belabor it in this conversation, but at the senior executive level, if they aren't starting with outcomes, no one else in your organization will. So pick those margin heavy or, you know, growth opportunity areas, pick one of those and start with an outcome and see where you get, and actually learn from that process of saying like, wow, we really need to understand, we need to have more people understand what our tech stack is. And without process modeling and documentation, I would argue, guys, how do you even communicate what your tech stack is?
Hmm.
Right.
Do you
Right.
even have some picture of that?
Great, great way to end it for us, Kari. By the way, a plea to all those people who are listening. You know, for those who are dealing with deaths in the family, which my wife is at this moment, please spend a minute focusing on that process. It's horrific. And I love your quote, Kari. Those kids are going to be your future customers.
Yeah.
Hey, Kari Moeller, KariMoeller. You can find her on LinkedIn. You can find John and the rest of us on analysis.tech. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending a half hour of your time with us. We so much appreciate it. Thank you, Kari.
Thank you,
Thank you
Kari.
guys. Appreciate it.